There is one glaring omission. That's this bit. We see at one point there is no trigger on this weapon. Okay, pause there. Our old friend, the M1 rifle, the Garand. The rifle's pretty well represented. We need some points, I think, for the way the distressed finish looks on that particular set of textures. I think it has a good sort of look to it. Having said that, actual soldiers in that time period and that setting would never decorate their rifle in that way. And if they did, they'd be up on a charge. But of course, this is not a US Army simulator. This is a first-person multiplayer shooter. We saw the complete reload there, where the operating rod the charging handle is pulled straight back, and the clip with whatever rounds are remaining in it goes flying out of the gun. That's what would happen if you did that. There is a method of topping up the on-block clip that's held inside the Garand. But to be fair, it is quite fiddly to pull off, and I'm not sure that any soldier would have been doing that in the field anyway. The difference with real life, of course, is that those rounds are gone. You can't get them back. So what you would do is eject the partial clip under control, put that somewhere safe in a pouch, and then load a full clip. And if you are actually in the middle of a firefight, I don't think you're going to be doing that. If you do, you're going to be doing it behind cover. Stop there. This is a nice one, I think, for me as a British firearms historian, for want of a better term, to see the boys in a game. It's been in a few, I think, but this is probably the most prominent appearance, and I've not seen anything wrong with it. If we're nitpicking, you can see an example behind me. A feature that I suspect my aging eyes are too rubbish to spot here. The Real Boys has a sprung recoiling barreled action. So it's got a chassis essentially, and within that is the barreled action, and that whole thing recoils against a very strong spring. And it's that plus the big teacup size muzzle brake on the front that tames the recoil enough to be able to fire this thing at all. And that's the take-home message of this, or any implementation in a video game of the boys. It's not a Barrett. Whereas with the Barrett, you can actually fire that from the shoulder. If you're strong enough to hold it up on the point of aim, you can fire it from the shoulder. You can't do that with the boys. And there's not enough slowing down of the recoil impulse to prevent you from at least stumbling backwards if you fire this thing from the shoulder. So you'd need to be a serious unit to be able to run and gun with this thing. And I'm not sure it would even be possible. If it was, I very much doubt you'd hit anything you were aiming at. It's incredibly heavy. It was a struggle for me to put it on the table, but then I have tiny curator arms, so... Of course, I've never got on with the Battlefield 1 or Battlefield 5 with the air combat. But if I was in an aircraft and I got taken out by that collection of pipes, I think I'd be pretty upset, especially as a one-shot kill. We've got here another weapon that we don't have in the Royal Armouries collection, which makes me sad. It's quite ingenious, as a lot of weapons in the Second World War were, and it really is just a bunch of pipes, because it's a rocket launcher. And the concept, which is pretty genius really, was 20mm cannon projectiles, which explode when you hit an aircraft anyway. I gather it wasn't hugely successful. I can't think why. It seems to work perfectly well in Battlefield 5. What they're calling the lunge mine, which I think is a loose translation of the Japanese, because this is very much a last-ditch weapon. Japan, being on the losing end of the war in 1945, along with Germany, had a number of last-ditch weapons, be it cheaper rifles, even cheaper rifles, reverting to sort of jam tin bombs, grenades, things like that. This thing is very much one of those. Okay, next up, we've got Bergmann MP28-2 submachine gun. It looks pretty good. I did notice a difference with the rear sight aperture. On the real one here, it's extremely small and V-shaped. The version of the sight in the game is significantly larger and more U-shaped. There is one glaring omission from this video game version of the MP28-2. That's this bit. the bang switch, as it's sometimes known, or trigger if you prefer. This model, I don't know if it's a glitch or what, but we see at one point there is no trigger on this weapon. Well, it would still work in theory, but it's not really very effective. All right, pause there. The most effective machine guns are truly useful for fire support and being a base of fire for a unit. There are very few exceptions to that. One of them is the Japanese Type 11, which is what we see here. It's like a lot of Japanese weapons, to Western eyes anyway, it's very distinctive in its look. This beast, which feels substantially heavier than it looks in the game, if that makes any kind of sense at all, is the Suomi KP31. Now, the one I've got here is fitted with this is a later example, which matches the model used in the game. It's fitted with the 40-round drum magazine. There's a 71-round drum magazine as well. Poor saps in the game are stuck with a 20-round box magazine, which was in common use. So it's not as though it's wrong or anything. But if you had the choice, you would want the drum magazine, because this design of drum, which was copied by the Russians as well, is one of the better drum magazines ever designed. It means that really high rate of fire, which is faithfully represented in the game, doesn't just run you out of ammunition in the blink of an eye. You can actually start to walk shots onto the target by observing where your bullets are striking. I can't recall, or possibly haven't ever played this in Battlefield 5, I can't remember, but in theory it would be more controllable due to the compensator ports that are designed into the barrel, at the end of the barrel shroud, I should say, and those are on the game model, and it didn't look like we were getting too much dispersion from the design. Okay, pause. Now this is a really interesting inclusion in the game. The M3 carbine, which is the gun, and what's the hilariously named sniper scope. This is about the furthest thing from a sniping weapon that you could imagine, but that's what it was called. And this is a Generation 1 night vision device in modern terminology. So this is pretty well represented in the game as far as the model goes. The elephant in the room is this bit, because that has to be attached to an enormous truck battery, which we don't have here. We have several sets of these because the Americans couldn't see the use for these, and I don't know that I blame them. British Korean War veteran who told me about being issued these things and not knowing what the hell they were at first. And essentially you'd be crouched in a bush waiting for a green blob to float past the green blob that was your view, because it's not like the game with that relatively crisp grayish view. Well, for all I know, it is grey, but from what I understand, it would be more of a green colour. Certainly, you wouldn't be able to discern a person beyond, I don't know, 50 yards, 50 meters, something like that. I guess within that distance, within that very short distance, this was a sort of sniper weapon, because you were one soldier trying to score a kill with a scope. So it's sort of a sniper weapon, but not really. And last up, we have the American Liberator pistol. This was much more of a psychological weapon than it was a real weapon. It is a real weapon, it is deadly, but it was so crude and so slow to reload, which we definitely do get from watching the game, that it really was fit only for capturing a better weapon. In reality, it was much more use in terms of denting the morale of the Nazis by dropping these with their leaflet, their instruction leaflet and their box. We have a box here, which is tied up with strings. It's not in the best condition, but it has a picture of what it is on the outside. It does work much like in the game. Unrifled, very short barrel. So in some ways, the low damage that we see in the game is sort of realistic, because this is nowhere near its ballistic potential. But at the same time, it's still going fast enough at these ranges to create a 45 caliber hole in your body, which is exactly what a 1911 would do. Accuracy would be awful. I know people have shot these and they're pretty much what you'd expect. Not very accurate, but good enough for the sort of 10 meters that a pistol is typically used at.